There's a moment when exhaustion becomes invisible, when the weight pressing down on a mother's chest has no name, no witness, no escape. She wakes up. She makes breakfast. She answers questions she's answered 100 times before. She smiles when she's supposed to. And somewhere deep inside, a sentence forms, one she will never say out loud. This is the story of a woman who carried that silence until it became unbearable. A story about the words trapped inside millions of mothers, the ones they feel but can't speak, the ones that could change everything if only someone was listening. This isn't about failure, it's about survival, and the moment when silence becomes too loud to ignore. She hadn't slept through the night in 4 years, not once. People said it would get easier, that babies eventually learn to sleep, that routines settle in and life finds its rhythm again. But they didn't mention what happens when there are 3 of them. 3 different ages, 3 different needs. 3 voices calling for her at once, every single day from the moment her eyes opened until long after they should have closed. Claire stood at the kitchen counter at 5:47 in the morning, staring at a sink full of bottles she'd meant to wash the night before. The baby monitor cackled beside her. Upstairs, her youngest was stirring. She had maybe 10 minutes before the crying started. Her husband, Marcus, was already gone. He left early for work most mornings, slipping out quietly while the house was still dark. She used to wake up when he kissed her forehead. Now, she barely noticed. He'd say he was doing it for them, working long hours to keep things stable, to give the kids what they needed. And maybe that was true. But it didn't change the fact that she was alone. Alone with the bottles and the laundry and the grocery lists and the pediatrician appointments and the school emails she hadn't opened in 3 days. Alone with the weight of making sure everyone else was okay while she slowly disappeared. The crying started, right on schedule. Claire closed her eyes and took a breath that didn't quite fill her lungs. Then she climbed the stairs, one hand gripping the railing a little too tightly, and walked into the nursery. Ethan was standing in his crib, tears streaming down his red face, arms reaching for her. She picked him up. He was heavier than he used to be. Everything was heavier than it used to be. She changed his diaper in the dim light, speaking softly to him the way mothers are supposed to. Soothing, gentle, present. But her mind was already running through the day ahead. Breakfast for all 3. Packing lunches, the permission slip she forgot to sign, the load of laundry that had been sitting in the washer for 2 days, and probably smelled like mildew by now. By 7:15, the kitchen was chaos. Her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, couldn't find her favorite shoes. Her 4-year-old son, Noah, refused to eat anything except cereal. But they were out of the kind he liked, and now he was crying too. Ethan was strapped into his high chair, throwing pieces of banana onto the floor. Claire moved between them like she was underwater, slow and heavy, her voice calm, even though her heart was racing. She found the shoes under the couch. She poured Noah a bowl of the wrong cereal and told him it was a special new kind. She wiped banana off the floor and off the high chair and off her own shirt. And when Lily asked her if she was okay, Claire smiled and said yes. She always said yes, even when the answer was no. Even when the exhaustion sat so heavy in her chest, she thought she might collapse under it. Because that's what mothers do. They keep going. They hold it together. They don't complain, because complaining means you're ungrateful. And how can you be ungrateful when you have 3 healthy children and a husband who works hard and a house that's mostly clean and food on the table? How can you say you're drowning when everyone else seems to be swimming just fine? Claire dropped Lily off at school and drove to the grocery store with the 2 younger boys. She used to have a system for shopping trips, snacks in the diaper bag, a list organized by aisle, a plan. But today she'd forgotten the list, and Noah was already whining before they made it through the automatic doors. She grabbed a cart and started moving, picking up the things she could remember. Milk, bread, more bananas. Ethan squirmed in the cart seat, reaching for everything on the shelves. Noah wanted a toy from the display near the checkout. She said no. He asked again. She said no again, but quieter this time because people were looking. In the frozen food aisle, she stood in front of the glass doors and stared at the rows of meals she didn't have the energy to cook. A woman walked past her, talking on the phone, laughing about something Claire couldn't hear. The woman's cart was neat, organized. Her kids weren't with her. Maybe they were at school. Maybe she had help. Maybe she was one of those mothers who had it all figured out. Claire looked down at her own cart. A jar of peanut butter had fallen over and cracked. Sticky brown spread was leaking onto a loaf of bread. She picked it up slowly, her hands shaking just enough to notice. She stood there, holding the broken jar, and for a brief, terrifying second, she felt nothing at all. That night, after the kids were finally asleep, Claire sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the tile floor. Marcus was downstairs, watching something on his laptop. She could hear the faint sound of voices through the vents. She'd told him she was going to take a bath, but she hadn't turned the water on. She just sat there, in the quiet, in the stillness, trying to remember the last time she'd felt like herself. Not a mother, not a wife, just Claire, the person she used to be before all of this. But that version of her felt so far away now, like someone she'd read about in a book a long time ago. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her sister. "How are you doing?" Claire stared at the words. 3 simple words that should have been easy to answer. But her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and she didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to explain that she was fine and also falling apart. That she loved her children more than anything, and also resented how much of herself she'd lost to them. That she was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. That every day felt like surviving, not living. That she was scared of what it meant to feel this way. Scared of being a bad mother. Scared of asking for help and being told she wasn't trying hard enough. So she typed what she always typed. "I'm good. Just busy. Hope you're well." She hit send and set the phone down. Then she turned on the water and sat there, listening to it fill the tub, wondering if anyone would notice if she just stayed in this room and never came out. Wondering if anyone really saw her anymore, or if she'd become invisible. A function, a role, a list of tasks that never ended. She sank into the water and closed her eyes, and somewhere deep inside, a sentence formed. One she would never say out loud. One that millions of mothers had felt, but never voiced. It sat there in the silence, heavy and true and terrifying. And Claire let it stay buried, because saying it out loud would make it real. And she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about the day. No major crisis. No emergency. Just the same endless loop of needs and noise and never being enough. Claire had been up since 4:30 because Ethan was teething again. By 8, she'd already refereed 2 fights between Noah and Lily, scrubbed applesauce off the wall, and realized she'd forgotten to pay the electric bill. Again. Marcus had left early for a meeting. He'd kissed her on the cheek and told her he'd try to be home by 7. She knew what that meant. He wouldn't be. At 9, she got a call from the school. Lily had a fever. Could she come pick her up? Claire looked at Ethan, who was finally napping in his playpen, and Noah, who was building something with blocks in the corner. She just sat down, just 1 minute to herself. But she said yes, because what else could she say? She loaded the boys into the car and drove to the school, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Lily was waiting in the nurse's office, pale and quiet. Claire signed her out, carried her to the car, buckled her in, and drove home in silence. By noon, all 3 kids were melting down. Lily was crying because she didn't feel well. Noah was crying because he wanted to go to the park and didn't understand why they couldn't. Ethan was crying for reasons Claire couldn't figure out. She'd fed him, changed him, held him, rocked him. But he kept crying. that high-pitched wail that made her skull feel like it was splitting open. She paced the living room with him on her hip, bouncing, shushing, singing the same lullaby she'd sung 1,000 times. And something inside her started to crack. She set Ethan down in his playpen, gently, carefully, and walked into the kitchen. She pressed her palms flat against the counter and stared at the wall. Her breathing was shallow. Her vision was blurring. She could still hear the crying from the other room, layered and relentless. And she felt something rising in her chest that she couldn't name. Rage. Grief. Desperation. All of it at once. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But she just stood there frozen, while her children cried for her and she couldn't move. Her phone rang. It was Marcus. She stared at his name on the screen, and for the first time in years, she didn't answer. She let it ring until it stopped. Then she turned off her phone and slid down to the floor, her back against the cabinet, her head in her hands. The crying continued. The house felt like it was closing in on her. And in that moment, Claire finally let herself think the sentence she'd been holding back for so long. The one that terrified her. The one that made her feel like the worst mother in the world. I don't know if I can do this anymore. It wasn't that she didn't love her children. She did, more than anything. But love wasn't enough to keep her from breaking. Love didn't erase the exhaustion or the loneliness or the suffocating weight of being needed every second of every day. Love didn't stop her from feeling like she was disappearing, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of who she used to be. And the worst part was that she couldn't tell anyone, because mothers aren't supposed to feel this way. Mothers are supposed to be grateful, strong, selfless. They're supposed to handle it, and if they can't, it means they're failing. Claire didn't know how long she sat there on the kitchen floor. Eventually, the crying stopped. She heard Noah's voice talking to Lily in the other room, soft and sweet, trying to make his sister feel better. She heard Ethan babbling to himself, probably chewing on one of his toys. The house was quieter now. But the silence didn't bring relief. It brought shame. Because she'd needed to escape her own children. She'd needed to walk away. And what kind of mother does that? She pulled herself up off the floor and went back into the living room. Lily was curled up on the couch under a blanket. Noah was sitting next to her, showing her his toy trucks. Ethan was in his playpen, gnawing on a teething ring, his eyes red from crying. They were okay. They were fine. But Claire didn't feel fine. She felt like a shell, hollow, going through the motions. She sat down on the floor next to the playpen and watched her children. And she felt so far away from them, like she was looking at them through glass. That evening, when Marcus finally came home, he found her sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. The kids were in bed. The house was quiet. He asked if she was okay. She didn't look at him. She just said she was tired. He nodded, said something about work being stressful, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and went upstairs. And Claire sat there alone, realizing that no one was going to save her. No one was going to notice she was drowning, unless she said something. But she didn't know how to say it. She didn't know how to ask for help without sounding weak or ungrateful or broken. The next morning, she called her doctor. It took everything she had to make that call, to admit that something was wrong. The receptionist was kind. They had an opening next week. Claire took it. She hung up the phone and stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the same mess, the same noise, the same life that was crushing her. But something had shifted, just slightly. She'd taken one small step. She'd acknowledged that she couldn't keep doing this alone. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a cure. But it was something. A crack in the silence. Over the next few days, Claire started paying attention to the thoughts she'd been pushing down. The resentment, the exhaustion, the fear. She let herself feel them instead of hiding from them. And slowly, carefully, she started talking. She texted her sister and told her the truth. Not the polished version, the real one. She told Marcus one night, after the kids were asleep, that she was struggling, that she needed help, that she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. He didn't understand at first. He got defensive. But she didn't back down. She kept talking, and eventually, he started listening. Claire went to her doctor's appointment. She sat in the exam room and said the words out loud for the first time. I think I have postpartum depression. I think I'm burning out. I don't know how to keep doing this. The doctor didn't judge her, didn't tell her she was being dramatic. She listened. She asked questions. She talked about treatment options, about therapy, about the fact that what Claire was feeling was real and valid and not her fault. And for the first time in months, Claire cried. Not the silent tears she shed alone in the bathroom. Real, heavy, cathartic sobs, because someone finally saw her. Someone finally heard her. Recovery didn't happen overnight. There were still hard days. Days when the weight came back and the exhaustion felt unbearable. But Claire started building a support system. She asked her mother to help with the kids one afternoon a week. She and Marcus divided responsibilities more evenly. She started therapy. She joined an online group for mothers dealing with burnout, and she realized she wasn't alone. Thousands of women felt the same way. Thousands of women were carrying the same silent sentence. And when they started saying it out loud, when they started sharing the truth, the shame began to lift. One evening, a few months later, Claire sat on the back porch while Marcus put the kids to bed. The sun was setting. The air was cool. She had a cup of tea in her hands and knew where she needed to be for the next 30 minutes. It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. She wasn't healed. She wasn't perfect, but she was learning how to survive without disappearing. Learning that asking for help didn't make her weak. That struggling didn't make her a bad mother. That the silence she'd carried for so long didn't have to define her. She took a sip of her tea and exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe.